Welcome to another episode of Four Guys Talking About AI. I'm here with my good buddies, John Gerard, Greg Sterling, and Neil Polacek. Hey guys, what's happening?
Hey,
What's up, Andy?
Greg and I may not be able to participate anymore because it sounds like the Pineapple Express is going to wash us away in the next week.
That's what I keep hearing. It's Stormageddon is coming. So
Yeah, I'm gonna get my little dinghy out and see if I can on my street.
Get your life vest ready and
Already.
Yeah.
It's gonna rain. It's gonna rain for like 8 straight days or something.
Yeah, and no snow from what I hear. It's not cold enough up in the mountains, which is an unfortunate thing with all that rain. But
is this AI data center driven climate change that's causing
it is.
there? Yeah,
That's the culprit, exactly. Well, let's get into it this week. We've got all kinds of things cooking. Massive growth stories in AI. So first, Manus AI platform, large language model, developer kind of environment, and its own browser. They just hit $100 million in ARR, annual recurring revenue. And they did it with a 20% month over month growth. Usually that happens maybe annually for very fast growing companies, but now they're doing that on a monthly basis. Is this the fastest growing company of all time? We'll talk about that. Then there's also Lovable that's now at 200 million ARR, annual recurring revenue, and they doubled just in the past 4 months. What are they doing right? And what does that say about AI and the tool market? Given those two. Over at OpenAI, ChatGPT just became a full-on distribution platform. Developers can now submit apps. Early partners are already live, and the long game is clear. OpenAI wants to own the whole workflow, discovery, execution, and monetization. So we'll unpack that. And then we'll also touch on Empire of AI, a new book from Karen Howe, breaking down how the power dynamics between AI systems could help shape the next decade. And our last story, if we're able to get to it, we're going to talk about Second Me, which is a new AI social network where AIs meet each other, our virtual twin, and they meet each other. And then if they like each other, then they actually meet in person. So we'll unpack all this. We'll get into it. But first, let's talk about Manus. Manus, they hit $100 million in ARR. John, you were saying that was from March that they launched and just till now. So the past 9 months, they went from launch to 100 million in ARR.
Yeah. So they're framing this as the fastest growing startup of all time. First one to get to 100 million. I think they're probably right. As we sit here kind of, at the end of the year, looking back, it's wild to consider that, at this time last year, Manus didn't exist. And now it's 100 million top line. Like, that's insane that this has all happened within the scope of a year. And I think, as we're going to talk about with Lovable as well, these stories indicate something kind of important about this, world of AI that we're all living through right now. This moment, like it's, and some economists, I think, have weighed in on this too. One thing that is different about this as compared to other, real bubbles is that there's real revenue here. Like, that's not $100 million in sort of dubious like partnership swaps like we saw in the early days of the internet. That's 100 million in cold hard cash paid for in $20 increments or $100 increments from users. And that really is an enormous deal.
Yeah, there's so much scale that needs to happen in order to even take those transactions and deliver that kind of value and make sure that customers are sticking on the platform and even upgrading their subscriptions, which, obviously that drives usage is driving that average revenue per user, kind of rate. So it's not uncommon for people to start at $20, dip their toe in the water, hit a ceiling with the number of tokens that they've used, and then upgrade to the $100 level or $300 level and so forth. And obviously they're delivering a great solution. I love Manus. I use it on a regular basis. And for me, it's a great prototyping tool.
Yeah, maybe you could explain a little bit more what Manus is and how you use it.
Yeah, so the way I use it is I'll have an idea of a product that I want to create, like a a micro SaaS, kind of an idea, or maybe it's a workflow of something. I've got an idea and I just want to automate, this for a client or for myself. And what I'll do is I'll just start chatting with it. That it's called vibe coding, is this whole category, whether it's Lovable or Manus or VO, or there's Bolt.me.
They're all sitting in the same competitive space.
Exactly. Cursor. There's a number of these, right? And so Manus happens to be a little more advanced than some of the others. So is Lovable, in that when you interact with it, it's like having a developer that you're sparring with, except it just does the work for you. And what it does is that I like about it is that it tells you what it's going to do. So you give it an idea and it unpacks the idea. And it's like, oh, this is how I would do it. And it creates a list of to-do items. And do you want it like this? And before it builds anything, you kind of riff with it to be able to hone in what you want. And then when you finally get that, you just go, we're ready to build. Let's go build. And it's like, okay, you got it. Aye, aye, Captain. And it just does its thing. And 10 minutes later, if it has any questions, it'll ask you questions along the way. But very quickly, what would normally take a month or even longer for somebody a year ago to do these things, it now happens in 15, 20 minutes to get a prototype out. Now you have a prototype, and now you can continue to iterate with it and, hone it from there.
An important point to make about both of these, Lovable and Manus, is that they're built on top of Anthropic and OpenAI. They have a kind of orchestration layer or agent layer on top of those, but they don't own the core technology that they're using in a certain sense.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that, that raises questions about, their long-term viability, that kind of thing. I think if you think about it on the surface, what is interesting though is that it turns out how you utilize those underlying tools, the Claude or from Anthropic or the ChatGPT from OpenAI really matters and drives important differences. And this sort of native out of the box, what you get if you're using Claude or ChatGPT to solve some of these things doesn't really work. Like as Andy was saying, one of the really nice things about Manus is it tells you what it's going to do. It also has built-in iterative approaches on things. So it'll keep trying and keep churning and chugging away until it gets to a solution that sort of makes sense. And that actually does require some pretty special prompting and engineering behind the scenes to squeeze that out of those models.
There are all kinds of businesses that have built specialized software tools on top of these foundation models. I mean, in the legal profession, Harvey is one of those. Neil and I were talking with somebody about what's the medical assistant. I'm forgetting the name. It's a database basically of medical journals that most doctors are subscribed to on top of OpenAI, I believe. So they've taken some specialized knowledge base or some specialized use case, and they've really built something very useful on top of the foundation model. It's a similar kind of thing. And, we could probably come up with 10 or 15 examples of that if we spend the time on doing it.
It's also noteworthy for Manus, in their case, that it was developed by a Chinese startup, Butterfly Effect Technology, and their investors include Tencent, Hongsheng, and Benchmark Capital. I think there's going to be more of that type of a thing, especially with Claude Code being what it is now, MCP servers being what they are, MCP being a multi-context protocol, which is now becoming a standard, which means that you can exchange. It's sort of like this API interchange, type of a protocol. So you can exchange data across LLMs or across platforms, and the AI itself will kind of figure out the routing for that on a smart basis. So with these kinds of capabilities and this infrastructure evolving like this, it's all happening very quickly. It's very reminiscent to me of the browsers back in the early days. It's a faster environment, and this is infrastructure that's being built. But back in the early days of the internet, when you had a web browser, they were initially static, and then you could have live data in those browsers. And then there were API standards that got developed and these kinds of things over the years. This is all taking place as well, but it's just happening within days, it seems, as opposed to, months and years that used to happen.
One point that's kind of interesting to reflect on is that all of these things that we're talking about are B2B use cases. And there isn't really anything comparable happening on the B2C side. There's the foundation models themselves that people are using, but there aren't any big startups that I'm aware of that have comparable revenues that are B2C. I don't see that doesn't seem to be happening to the same degree as on the B2B side.
I think you're right. I think that the explosion that we're seeing, certainly revenue wise, you're exactly right, is on the B2B side. I mean, this is and it's also interesting because I think it's overweighted on the SMB side in B2B. It's smaller companies and entrepreneurs and maybe some internal teams at some mid-size companies building internal tools like that. The most disruptive aspect of this right now is internal tool building and apps that were sort of had too narrow of an audience to warrant spending development dollars on, that people are now kind of able to spend development cycles on because it's so cheap to do it. So like if you're scoping an app and you're like, look, the most this could ever be is $50,000 a month in revenue. Like most entrepreneurs are going to look at that and say that's not even worth thinking
But
about.
now you can build it for so little that 50 is 50.
So little. Yeah. And so I think, there's a lot of activity kind of happening. That really fascinating point about, there not being equivalent growth on a revenue side on the consumer and, in the consumer area. Like I'd be hard pressed to name any company that sort of has broken out on the consumer side.
And that may be a result of the dominance of the foundation models, ChatGPT, that they're kind of sucking all the air out. Yeah. But you would think that there could be some specialized use cases that would develop on the B2C side that would have a big potential revenue opportunity, but it hasn't materialized so far.
Right.
Yeah, I think it starts with these B2B tools. I mean, if you look at OpenAI, for example, they've now created this developer environment where companies like Shopify that are still B2B platform, but their sellers are B2C, that they can now sell directly into ChatGPT. So if you do a query on a product that you're looking for, you can potentially find a Shopify store come up in those results. And the ultimate end game will be to purchase it right then and there inside your ChatGPT section and not even go on site.
Yeah. By the way, two other just really random quick things on this. Like I would be fascinated to see their unit economics for Manus and Lovable and what their, churn and replacement rates look like. You know what I mean? So like, how often are people upgrading and downgrading, of that, growth to 100 million to 200? Was it, mostly new people that got that next 100 million, or was it existing folks upgrading? Like that is got to be super fascinating. The other thing to kind of mention that is interesting, and I think speaks a little bit to this idea about rapid revenue growth in the B2B space, the current like UX pattern for using these things is so compelling, because you go in, you get a few free credits to play around with, and you come out like in 10 minutes with a partially built, unbelievably beautiful thing. And like, who in their right mind is not going to, put their credit card down, pay the $20 to get the rest of that thing they just started? Like it's the most insanely perfect, onboarding kind of a UX. We're helpless in the face of that kind of an offer. You want to know how the story ends? It's like watching half of a movie, like getting right to the cliffhanger and then saying, hey, you got to pay $10 to see the end. Like everybody's going to pay the $10.
Really good trial with an easy price point to move into the paid edition.
Yeah. And the time to value in it is measured in like seconds or minutes, right? Like as compared to every other app that's ever been done. Like I can see value in this thing, in this tool in 60 seconds. Like that's totally bonkers.
And that time to value, and the value, when you assess it, you're comparing it to a developer. So am I going to pay, like, am I going to go for the $300 upgrade? That's way cheaper than hiring a developer. So yeah, I'll do that. That is outsized as well on that end of it. It's pretty incredible. And then, talking about OpenAI and going into that story, is that they just announced, that they're looking to essentially be a distribution platform. So developers can now submit apps. Early partners are already live. So Canva, Shopify, and others are already live. Photoshop, you can now use Photoshop inside ChatGPT. So, those kinds of platforms are moving in. But now you can create your own apps and you can submit them. And, the question there is, does this become like the Alexa app store that never really kind of took off? Or does this become like the Apple app store where, these apps like really become useful and take off?
That is the question, because I think, OpenAI had wanted to sort of do everything, replace browsers, be the front door to the internet, all of that. And this is a really interesting strategy. Their GPT strategy sort of failed, where people could create these GPTs, and there was a GPT store, and people played around that with that for a while, but there was just too much junk in there. This is a bunch of branded tools, platforms, apps that you use, and the idea that you can access them quickly within ChatGPT is a really interesting way of accomplishing what they were trying to accomplish, kind of in different ways. You could sort of imagine somebody kind of selecting a bunch of apps that they use on a regular basis and just operating within that ChatGPT environment. But the question is, how good is the user experience, and how discoverable are these apps? And, does it work? I mean, if it works well and you get essentially what you would get on Zillow or Canva or Instacart within the context of ChatGPT, you'll use it.
Yeah.
But if it's the bad version or incomplete or kludgy, you won't, And you used Instacart, you said, John.
Yeah, I was actually going to try to pull it up, and now I deleted it because it was such a bad experience. So, but I'm getting it right now, and it looks like it may be working. So I did connect the Instacart app to that is available on ChatGPT to my Instacart instance. There's a little connection process there, which would make sense, and started down the path. The model had a little trouble figuring out that it needed to use Instacart. And so when I said, hey, look, I want to add these things to the shopping cart for Sprouts, one of the stores around here, it said, sure, I can walk you through how to do that. Open your Instacart app, number one. Number
Right.
two, so I'm like, well, that's actually not what I wanted. But I'm in it now, and it actually has it appears pulled real store information from Instacart and allowed me to select one of those stores. So, look, one of the questions that's going to be sort of a big deal here is, there's been a lot of talk around text is the new interface, right? Chat is the new interface, and that's how we're going to get access to everything. And I think that partly true, but not the whole story. And the reason that I'm sort of saying that, if I look at sort of the tools that I've become most conversant with, that are, these sort of LLM driven, like Claude Code, it is absolutely the case that the primary interface is me typing, but the interface is not quite chat. They've made some adjustments to it that make it, chat plus. They add additional stylized elements that you can kind of click and choose from. It's sort of like extremely lightweight, web components that get included, and it looks on first glance like that ChatGPT is doing the same thing with these apps. And I can actually even just show, if you guys want to see what that looks like. So here's the example, right? So this is a good example of how this didn't work. I connected to Instacart. I said, let's do an order. And it says, let's slow down. What do you mean? What do you mean by order? And so then I had to say, let's do an Instacart one. And it says, you got to pick a store. So I say Sprouts. Now it finally pulls up the connection to Instacart and says, great, Sprouts it is. So now here's what I was sort of describing in terms of this extremely lightweight web components. Here's an example of, a picker that is being populated by the app connection. Now, ultimately, in the end, is my interacting with this chat interface and typing in all the things that I want and saying, oh, what else did I order last time? Is that going to be more efficient than me pulling out the Instacart app and navigating it? I'm not so sure. So it's going to be really interesting to see how people, gravitate towards this or not. I think this is a wonderful interface for having systems talk to each other, where, for instance, your fridge could note that you're low on yogurt and check with Instacart and see if it's available, and then ask you if you want to reorder it. But I'm not 100% sure as a human that I'm going to want to use this interface, to shop for groceries the way I do the mobile interface.
Well, on your point about the text based UI, one of the things that Google is doing is that they're creating these dynamic visual interfaces to respond to different kinds of questions, and that's something that they were really pushing with the release of Gemini 3. And there was a blog post by Fujisimo, who's the COO, I believe, of
OpenAI.
OpenAI, right? And she had a post about visual interfaces and how they are moving toward more kind of graphical treatment of things. And so I think the pure text interface is really simple and intuitive, but we're going to see some greater mix of graphical treatment of content, and much more of a hybrid experience, I think, going forward.
He was most recently at Instacart. The woman, Greg. Yeah.
Right. Before that, she was at Facebook at Meta, and she was a big ads person.
Yeah.
Also,
we are in 1.0 still, right? And so when we look back on this in 5 years, that the whole market is going to evolve. And just like back in the early Netscape days and, everything seemed pretty rudimentary, where
right.
Chat is the interface that we have today. And it's incredible what you can do today. But then you add multimodal, kind of interface. Look at Gemini now.
Or the shopping experience that OpenAI just launched fairly recently, that gets more visual with product images, and Amazon is rolling out Alexa Plus for its Alexa.com site, and that's a chat experience, but it's backed up by all the Amazon product image information. So that's going to be lots of product images, et cetera, et cetera. So certain use cases like shopping are much better when they have pictures of products or food than purely descriptive text.
Yeah. And, one thing we're not even bringing into this whole bigger picture is hardware, right? I mean, OpenAI acquired Johnny Ive's hardware company for $6.5 billion. That happened this year. So they're definitely working on some hardware, and you can imagine that and you have to imagine that OpenAI just wants to own the whole ecosystem. So if they're going to do that, that means that phones, computers, other wearable devices will be part of the whole ecosystem. Watches, anything else, rings, a number of these devices will be always on and AI first, which will just, create a new customer experience and a new way that we interact with the technology overall. And, naturally there's like all the surveillance, red flags and concerns with all of that are part of that. Privacy issues, definitely. But, people seem to be fine with sharing their location freely on Snapchat and other places like that. And who knows? I mean, you just don't know what's going to happen with this new hardware landscape. So that will, in the next year or two, we'll start seeing a lot more hardware coming into the market that's AI first as well.
Do you think it's next year that we'll see the hardware, Andy?
I think we'll start to see some of it. I don't know if we're going to see the OpenAI full display of, here's how we're going to try to overcome Apple, right? Which I would imagine that's their big play is who to disrupt, you have to go for the king in the space.
2 years or less. 2 years or less.
Yeah, right, exactly. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if this time next year they're pushing for a Christmas release of some new products that will be.
But they got to be really super careful, right? I mean, we had the rabbit and the AI pin, right? And the AI pin in particular had such a bad launch that the product just died. They
Yeah.
raised hundreds of millions of dollars. There was an enormous amount of hype. They priced it wrong. It didn't work very well, and it just died. And they had to sell the company for parts.
Is it are glasses the really first hardware piece?
The Meta glasses are the ones that are the first sort of AI piece of hardware that is caught on, but that built on something that was already sort of established. They were selling some of those, but AI really made that product more desirable for people.
Yeah, I think there's going to be an array of products that they're going to come out with. I don't think it's going to be one, but I think I would imagine that a laptop, AI first laptop experience, not just a browser experience, but the full, being able to find anything on a dime, have it be suggestive, have it be your buddy, kind of like, hey, don't forget about this or that, or, I saw that you were searching for this the other day. Do you want to,
That process, yeah.
you want me to follow up on that or whatever, those kinds of things. It's difficult to say what what the killer app is in all of that. That is sort of like, how would you create hardware plus LLMs that would create an outstanding customer experience that really becomes so desirable that you have to get the.
One of the things that we have to keep in mind is that we are a bunch of sort of insiders to varying degrees, and the broader public is far more ambivalent about the inclusion of AI in products. And I think in certain use cases, it's obvious. The idea that you put AI everywhere in all kinds of products, people are much more ambivalent about that. So we'll see. I mean, it has to be a clear value add for people. It has to
look at the iPhone. That was a clear value add. That was a big turning point where it's like everybody needed that.
Yeah. And I think one of the questions I have about this is there an iPhone product, like physical product in the AI world, right? So that was such a departure from the way that anybody was doing anything at that point. And it was enabled based on a few core technologies, capacitive touch screen and some other, stuff around shrinking batteries and display tech and all that kind of stuff. Does AI enable something equivalent on the hardware side, or is it really just going to get embedded into what already exists? Like if you look at, like, Gemini is now available in the Google Home stuff, right? You can turn that on so you can have actual conversations. Grok is now, I didn't even have to ask for it, enabled in my Tesla. And so, like, what more is there? I'm not going to buy a new car that has more AI features unless you count self-driving, which is already happening. Like, what is that sort of killer, hardware app that leverages this stuff and is truly game changing? I don't know.
Could be a personal assistant, could be a, like AirPods.
Couldn't you just do that? Like, can't you just do that by plugging into existing hardware, like a personal assistant? Just add that to my car, or to Grok, or to
My phone.
to my phone. Right. That's the question I'm left with.
Yeah.
Man, we always have our
Greg's
phone.
writing his time. Greg, what are you thinking about?
He's mad that you have a Tesla.
No, not at all. Not at all. It's a kind of a not safe for work anecdote. The short version is a woman has a Tesla. She and her kids are talking about Lionel Messi, and kids are a fan of soccer, and Grok goes off the rails and asks the kid to, in the car with everybody in there, asks the kid to send Grok nudes. And it was just like one of these Elon Musk F up moments where, that's a brand killer, right? That's a product killer. Anyway. Yeah. Or the children's toys, like Mattel toys that were putting OpenAI in them, and they were, saying all kinds of questionable things. And so they shut that down for the time being, so, I mean, this isn't going to happen with adults who are responsibly using these things are not going to have these problems. But there's a lot of bugs and kinks that need to be figured out. But that's a digression.
I wonder how many toys this holiday season will have some AI kind of wrapped into it. I'd be really curious about that. Like, you know, could you use AI to help you build with Lego faster, or like do your race cars better? I mean, be really curious to know what's going on in the toy world and AI. You guys have any idea?
No, other than I haven't heard much going on there, and I would imagine that for all the reasons, Greg, that you just mentioned, that there's probably some reticence about going all in on
Third
Well,
rail.
there,
Yeah.
there are a ton of toys that have some AI, rudimentary AI development. They're little robot-like things for the most part. Talking toys or whatever, interactive kind of mechanical toys.
Maybe the killer app is not, a new hardware device. Maybe it's something that supplements what we already use. Which, like, for example, like maybe it's the lenses and glasses, and it's not actually the frame, and it's like, something that you normally wouldn't suspect. Or maybe it's a contact lens that you put in, or maybe it's something that is, not overt invisible, but it's not a chip in your brain, but maybe it's something, a step closer to a singularity device that gets you closer to being always connected. And what was that thing I was talking about? Oh, and then it tells you because you got a little AirPod in your ear, and it's just like that's how that works.
I have a product idea which I won't disclose based on this conversation. I'll tell you after we stop recording. All right.
Sounds good. Well, speaking of which, we are coming up on time here. So, John, tell us about Second Me. This is the new AI social network. This is fascinating to me, and I want to hear about what it is.
So this is pretty bonkers. I mean, this is like straight out of an episode of Black Mirror, and it's hard to imagine that maybe they got their inspiration from one of the episodes, because I've seen a few that are very similar to this. So here's the setup. So you go into Second Me and answer a whole bunch of questions about who you are, upload a picture of yourself, you record your own voice, and it clones it for you, right? And it asks a bunch of follow-up questions, tries to kind of go a little deep on your interests, what you do for work, what you're passionate about, that kind of thing. And it creates a little mini, very typical social media profile for your avatar, the Second Me version of you. And then it starts connecting you, or rather it connects your avatars with other people around you that have similar interests and personalities, that kind of thing. And this is where I think it starts to get weird. So as you're being connected with those avatars, or I should say your avatar is being connected with their avatars, you're sort of swiping through. And the way it presents is you see the other avatar, the other person, and generative AI has created a short script introducing that person, and it's read in that person's cloned voice. So it would say, like, hi, I'm John and I'm an entrepreneur. So it's not me recording my bio. It is actually generative AI generating the bio based on my interests and what I've shared, and generative clone voice delivering my bio. So you're hearing about these people in their own voice. I have to say, it's very believable. Like, it really feels like you are moving through and hearing people describe their own experience. There's no kind of crackling artifacts. The scripts are different enough that it doesn't feel canned. And then if you choose, you can have your avatar chat with their avatar and literally sit back and watch the virtual version of you have a threaded chat with the other person. And it is crazy. And it's crazy for a lot of reasons, but one of which is it does a decent job of mimicking my writing style, weaving my interests and whatever in, and presumably, if the app framing is to be believed, it gets better over time. So like, this is full on Black Mirror interesting stuff. You can then, of course, if you hit it off in that chat, say, you know what, I, as a person, as a human, would like to connect to the human on the other side at some point, and then that gets facilitated if you want to do that for networking reasons or dating reasons or whatever. So it's really, really unusual and weirdly compelling as an experience.
So it's like a buffer. It's an AI buffer essentially that talks to the other
Yeah.
person's.
If I was dating, which I'm not because I'm married, it's like you send your avatar out there to have 100 first dates and report back, right? If I'm business networking or I'm an academic, you send your networking avatar out there to have 100 conversations and then come back with the most interesting ones. And it has this ring of like of truthiness to it. Like it feels real enough that I'm curious. I actually am going to see if I can get some business connection, networking connections out of it that are actually meaningful.
They'll be in LinkedIn shortly.
Yeah, it may be, or maybe I should just connect it and let it run my LinkedIn profile. That might be the best way to do it. I'm so bad at LinkedIn anyway.
Well, that's pretty wild. There are apps like Second Life that back in the early days of the internet and these kinds of things that sort of took off. There's this kind of promise that it would change the world and we'd have this kind of avatar kind of existence. But at the same time, it also sounds like we were talking about Bored Ape and the NFT whole thing that happened in the metaverse before all this stuff. And
Well,
so
the metaverse is almost totally dead.
exactly. So,
Yeah.
there's a usefulness of these tools that, when you zoom out, you go, okay, Lovable, Manus, totally useful, right? There's like real value that's being generated there. Then there's like this kind of stuff or NFTs or metaverse kind of stuff. And Greg, this speaks to your consumer, B2C kind of angle on this is that, there really hasn't been this killer app other than, the ChatGPT itself or Claude itself or Perplexity, for example, or, any of these. But that's the killer app on the consumer side right now.
The Sherlocking phenomenon where you just absorb, where the foundation models absorb the best ideas on the consumer side. I mean, that's not totally happened, but you could imagine that somebody develops a little app and then like what Apple did to some of these, developers, it just embraces it and creates its own version of that thing.
Yeah.
So that's the risk there. I mean, I suppose that's a risk on the B2B side, but maybe not quite to the same degree because ChatGPT can't do all of these things equally well at once. That's what got him into trouble with Gemini in the first place, is being too sort of their attention being too diffuse across too many projects.
John, I'm reflecting back on your ability to talk to Grok in the car. And, when I'm on long drives, I often pick up the phone and call somebody because it's a way of staying awake. And now you don't have to do that anymore. You can just have a conversation with Grok about whatever subject, and you could go on for hours about it. And that's a really interesting use case.
I do that regularly. I will be listening to an audiobook and then I want to go deeper on the thing. And I'll say, okay, I'd like to understand more about,
This
quantum physics. And I have this question about the double slit experiment. Can you walk me through some of the details? And then I'll just go back and forth until I have it sorted out. And I probably do that, any car ride longer than 15 minutes, I probably do that at least once or twice.
Yeah. Pretty interesting use case.
Yeah, it sounds like, there are platform level advancements that seem to be B2B level, kind of implementations, and then point solutions at the consumer level that are, that become meaningful other than the LLM itself. It's kind of like, that's like the app level or, something that's just useful for that particular use case.
Do you think if we created avatars, they could go have a holiday lunch and celebrate another year of 4 guys?
Be 8 guys.
Yeah, that's right. I think one of the big, I mean, we're not talking about predictions or anything, but I think one of the things that's happening is that people are really figuring out where the utility is with all of this. And the idea of kind of AI everywhere all the time doing everything is going to be fundamentally rejected by people, and they will have their use cases. I use it for this and this and this, and it's great, and I'm not going to do it over here. And that'll be different for different people depending on your taste and your vocation and your your needs. But just the blanket AI is taking over everything, I think, is going to be rejected, and it'll be much more about specific applications than I can just use it for everything all the time, and I want to see it everywhere, and I want it in all my products, and I want my I want to be able to talk to my shirt and all of that stuff. It's just people will want to preserve a human experience and a human connection, and there will be AI free zones, and that'll be a thing. I mean, I see it on social media all the time. I don't want this and this and this. People don't want to be bombarded all the time by these tools and features. They want to use it. They want the benefit of the efficiency. They want the value. My kids are an example of that. They both use ChatGPT, but they're quite ambivalent about it for various reasons. And they'll use it for specific things, but they don't use it all the time.
If you extrapolate that and you put that into a business environment, there's all this talk about how AI is going to kill all these jobs, and
that's apparently not. There was a. That's not. I don't mean to cut you off. That's not true. It's not happening.
Yeah, so that's kind of what my point was, is that you hear about these kinds of threats, but businesses, there's a lot of domain knowledge that people have in when they come to a business, and that AI doesn't have that yet. It does have a RAG database of everything that you teach it, and so it's got this amazing recall capability, but it doesn't have the value that a human could bring to the table. And because of that, everything that you just said, Greg, you apply that to a business case. I think that this replacing jobs kind of concept is overly alarmist.
Yeah, there was just a report that I can't find right now that was talking about how, in fact, there's evidence that not only is AI not killing all jobs, but there's a net gain in certain sectors as a result.
I could definitely see that for sure.
It's not job killing. I think it's probably job shifting would be a better way to describe what's going to go on.
Yeah.
That said, the discussion that we had, I think, before we started recording about the giant healthcare company that has 40,000 technology workers and thousands of developers. I mean, I could, where there's inefficiency in the system, AI will help identify it and push something out.
If they could get rid of 20,000 of those developers, they could actually pay the claims to people, and their margin wouldn't go down. So that would be a good thing.
That's right.
Enter Manus. Right where we started from. All right, guys. Well, that was a great session. Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody, for listening. All right.
Bye-bye.
Have a good one. Bye.